It's time for another edition of the Thought Project, just so you know. And today I'm outside again, enjoying the lovely weather. And I just want to note, starting out, that Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan signed law on Tuesday prohibiting the use of guns by convicted domestic abusers. So if you're a convicted domestic abuser in the state of Michigan, you are no longer allowed to own a gun. So just FYI, if you happen to be in Michigan and you're a convicted abuser. Um, it's sort of important to note that there's a lot going on as far as the processes with the House, and then also the Trump trial he's going through. Colorado has decided that Donald Trump will be placed on the 2024 presidential ballot despite claims of engaging in insurrection, and the judge ruled that he was not an officer of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. It's also important to note that there's a new MAGA tape dropping that's going to expose some people who are involved in the attack that may not have actually been punished yet. I have no idea if it'll be taken seriously or not, but what I do know is there was a woman that was a huge terrorist and has been in prison before and gotten out, and then I don't think she was arrested, who went and planned the attack, and I reported her like hundreds of times and had to make a point of just trying to avoid her because she was so dangerous and weird and she kept getting free. And she was just this little Russian woman, not Thursday, but a different woman that thought basically seemed to be able to do whatever she wanted, and I think was probably a member of the F.S.B. But she's still free today in the U.S., I think. So it'd be interesting to see if she would ever get picked up. Notably, the F.S.B. is inside the secretive Russian security force that targets Americans. From the Wall Street Journal is an article that came out over the summer. And they actually put up the symbol of the F.S.B. It's the two really thin eagles, not the American bald eagle, but two really thin yellow eagles on their emblem. And it's important to note if you ever have to deal with them, because they do come around the DC area a lot. They don't really respect borders for Russia. So they think of everything as just belonging to Russia. Like the US belongs to Russia, Canada is England, South America. Like they just don't conceive of the idea. And if you ever deal with them, it's just frustrating because they don't listen and they just constantly refuse to follow, the law in the US and want to claim that everything belongs to Russia. So they're doing like border patrol, but it's on like literally the whole world. It's just bizarre because the whole world doesn't belong to the government of Russia. So, it's important to note that the new U.S. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, a Republican from California, noted attacks by the Biden administration on free speech. Article 2, Section 4, impeachment, treasury, bribery, and schemes called pay to play. And barring declarations of war, Representative Johnson noted that impeachment is the most awesome power that Congress has. And claimed impeachment was necessary because of being barred by federal agencies from doing their investigations properly. So they were having to go through the impeachment process in order to get all the information on what's going on with Hunter Biden and President Biden himself. And it's important to note that just because there's a technicality and a process there of looking for information. So in Gaza, Palestine, one woman, I have to say this. Okay. So we're going to go through this really slowly. On the Gaza Palestinian conflict, I've noticed there's been a number of performers that have actually just lost their positions. Melissa Barrera, Susan Sarandon was dropped from her agency UTA for comments on the conflict. I noticed previously that people, it's just not a good topic to get into. Like, just stay out of the conflict because it's such a heated issue. And I know for a fact that there was one woman who should be a singer. She actually lip syncs, but she's a performer who stole from me. And she actually, for one of her music videos, dressed up in a rabbi hat for her video. And then she put on this really disgusting, like, skanky sex costume that was obviously meant to be offensive. And it was obviously meant to make Jews angry and hurt and insult them and to stir up religious fights. I mean, there's just no way about it. And the material she had stolen from me, she mixed together with a song from a Russian group that was literally about keeping people as slaves and put that into her refrain. So it was very much meant to be a song put together by someone who's Russian to insult everybody else and stir up fights. So it's just kind of important to note. And because of that kind of behavior, that was one of the reasons I was able to get some of the trafficking of me stopped, because I didn't feel like there were enough people that cared that I was getting material stolen and that people were just demanding I work for free and not getting paid for it. But when they saw that that was the product, that they were using it to produce this really hateful, angry material, and that, nothing of my personality or my style was actually in it, that was one of those arguments that helped me get out of being trafficked. But it went on way into my 30s. Never got paid for any of the work. And so much of the work was just offensive and weird that I really came to a point where I didn't even care about being paid, and I don't know if it would even matter. The important thing for me was that I put a stop to it. So, and I think for a lot of other people too. Um, and you can't, like, one issue I saw with Cersei and Wilhelm is that they would demand people engage in lawsuits. Well, how was I supposed to do that? Because, like, Buffalo Bill kept erasing all of my material. So, and all the evidence of that would go for a lawsuit. So I really couldn't actually have one. And that's kind of the point. You can't have a lawsuit without evidence for it. And then you have to make sure that there's actually a legal basis for it. Because if you're dealing with somebody who's just a felon, then it's really not going to be a lawsuit. It's important to note the U.S. military successfully struck an Iranian militia. It was announced today. An analyst at Fox Business also thinks that Iran is just at war with the U.S. totally, and the U.S. used an AC-130 gunship, launched a close-range ballistic missile against American forces stationed at Al Assad Air Base in western Iraq, according to the Pentagon. I think the main point for me with a lot of the trafficking issues I dealt with essentially was that, you know, what helped me more than anything was that some people were just competitive because they saw how much Cersei and Wilhelm were using me for free ideas, and they saw Buffalo Bill and the Swiss Miss and Karen, and even that Kendrick was either being forced to use material or was, and that I wasn't being paid, and it angered them as a competitive measure. So that actually worked in my favor. And then there's the fact that so much of the material was being taken and twisted and just made gross and like stuff that you wouldn't even want your name on because it was just horrible and nobody would want. There are people I didn't want to work for, people I didn't involved with. And there was a lot of weird behaviors. I mean, a lot of what happened to me was that I was literally getting beat up, especially by Buffalo Bill, and forced to work for free. And that, couldn't get Cersei and Wilhelm to go away and couldn't get the protective orders. And that was because of Patricia and Dan as well. And that's been an ongoing issue with them, the one agency I know about in Hollywood, but I don't know when all that's going to end. And I think the biggest issue there is that, for me, I looked at Kendrick's situation. I listened to what he said about the fact that he was being forced to go into a marriage and then another marriage, and that his partner now, like person she's supposed to be married to, her mom had said back at Luther College that she planned to kill him, that they planned to just traffic him and push him through the whole thing and then kill him, probably around this time period, actually. And that for me, I had to end up reporting it as just an APS case, and I told the government what was going to potentially happen. And it's kind of heartbreaking when you have to talk to someone that way. But, I looked at some of these other people like Buffalo Bill. I said, I've never met you. Whenever I did, it was like decades ago, and you were not a friend of mine or close to me or someone I would want to know. And you have no business talking to me about anything in my life. And I don't know that you actually even went to Luther College. And where did this idea come from that everyone went to Luther College was like this big, healthy, happy family where we would all just sacrifice for each other? Because that's not what that school was about. And that was not my experience there at all. And it is not okay for anyone from that school to ever approach somebody else, pretend to have this grand relationship, and then demand free labor. And it's actually not okay under any circumstances. And it's actually not legal in the US at all. And the other really big issue, I think, was that, for example, like as late as 2009 or even into the early 2010s, there was a woman that approached me who had been a sorority sister, and not in person, but other people approached on her behalf from the school and said she needed material or she'd be killed. And I said, well, that's really upsetting, but I don't even know who this is. And I don't know what's going on. And I didn't have a good relationship with that woman. And I actually left that sorority. So saying she needs help and I haven't seen her in over 10 years, this starts to sound like those crazy email schemes or the weird letters you get asking for money from foreign countries and you don't even know the people involved. Or if you did, it's been so long, you couldn't even be sure it was from them and they're certainly not contacting you. So how do you even know? And the amount of like just ridiculous lying, I think, that went on around all of it is what's really upset people so much to the point that we have two different, a current president and a past president both in trouble because some of it does tie, what I went through definitely ties back to both of them, either the mistakes they've made or who they knew and need to testify on themselves. And, I went through a long process of testifying and everything and then put the show together to kind of educate and inform people because there's nothing more disgusting than just violating, U.S. intelligence, other people's lives and privacy just to try to steal and so that you can pretend to be a performer of any kind. You know, when there's all these other people who are actually talented and can do it for real, and their attitude is, well, we have to do it because we want to, trap people or run drugs. Well, that's not an acceptable thing to do with somebody else's artistic ability or background or life. You know, I'm somebody who's been done with nursing school by now and working as a nurse, not trying to figure out what I'm doing next. So only not dealing with all the obstacles I've had to deal with. And there were too many people in the DC area that were obviously a part of it that were just ruined and said, we're just going to ruin nursing school for you too. You know, after chances to go to medical school are ruined, they wanted to ruin that as well. Well, that's just enough. I mean, there's no cause for people to act like this. And some of the people who said that were the exact same ones that wanted to go off and attack the U.S. Capitol. So I really hope that the government finishes rounding up all the people who were actually involved in that, and that, something good comes out of it for those of us who actually did the right thing and were willing to turn people in advance, because I think those of us who did have been penalized an awful lot and unfairly for doing what was the right thing. I don't think there's any excuse for attacking the U.S. Capitol. I just don't, ever. So that's my opinion on that. Have a good one. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Thanks.